Ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to the stage a Washington, D.C. native, like me, Therman Statom, the 2019 James Renwick Alliance Master of the Medium in Glass.
Thank you. Thank you, Alliance, for all you've done, and thank you for, I mean, the four artists. I'm just overwhelmed with what you do. This is kind of an emotional day for me because I used to play hooky in this building as a high schooler, and what I do is I think I went to 7 high schools and I got chased out of each one. So what I would do is I'd start at the National Gallery, and then at the time the the technology building had, for $1.50 you could get a Coke and a hamburger and fries, and then I'd always end up at the Freer studying ceramics. And a curator there by the name of Marty Amt, he noticed that I was always hiding out there, and he got me involved with making ceramics. And then one day he says, you know, there's some raku being demonstrated on the mall, and I go out to the mall, and I show them the work. They want to see my work, and I show them the work, and they flew me to the School of Design, and that's how I started. That's really how I started. And so I have a really emotional connection to institutions, to the Smithsonian. I remember going to the Renwick after one notorious day in high school. Notorious, I mean, oh my God, it was unbelievable. I think that was, and I went and I saw a Sam Gilliam show, and I said, that's what I want to do. So, you know, I went up to Rhode Island, and there was glass blowing, so I started blowing this glass stuff, you know, and Dale Chihuly was there, June Kaneko was there, they were just incredible. Norm Schumann was there. You know, and you know, I was 17. I didn't really know what to make, you know, and so I thought, God, why, you know, at this point I said, well, how do you learn? What is education? How do you process? Everyone loved what I did, so I started working with the unknown. So here I made a volcano. It started a fire on the floor. They were grumpy, but it was my first performance. Here we're chopping the glass, and I went, don't you go to school to make mistakes? You know, everyone said it was great. I thought, well, maybe it's because I'm black everyone says it's great. I don't know, you know. But these are things that I went through, and then, you know, and I'll be quick. I don't mean to be too autobiographical, but I remember making these cones one day and Dale coming in and saying, that's a great sculpture. And I was just storing them that way, you know, so I said, fine, you know. I was like, okay. You know, and you have to bear in mind, I couldn't even draw models because they were naked, and I had never seen someone naked, so I would copy off of someone else's paper. It was terrible. You know, so these are things I made, you know, and it was so incredibly exciting. You know, there's an artist, I think you've honored, Tutsinski. I saw her work, I said, can I make your work? I copied her work. I made everything she made for like 3 months. Just to learn. It was so much freedom, and I love to foster it to this current day. And this is like they were amazed when I made this thing, and I was like, that was great, and they loved it, and they gave me a year advance standing, and I had a whole drawing book. You know, June Kaneko would say, you should fill the drawing book, the whole book, every day a new one. So in a month I had 30 books. You know, and so I had a whole bunch of those pieces, and they were too easy to make, you know, they looked really good, everyone was sort of happy, you know. So I, you know, as I graduated, I got interested in the process, the process of making things was as important to me, and maybe more so, and what I learned from them as the objects. And, you know, I'd get asked to make a show, and so I said, can I make the work at the gallery? And the guy would say, yeah, so this is a product of that effort. And he says, well, I want to paint. He says, well, you don't paint, don't you? He says, well, I'm going to find out if I can, you know. And this show was about, you know, we brought all these objects in, and then, that this is the, looking back in the gallery, he got grumpy. He got really grumpy at me because he couldn't sell things. And they put these red dots on things, So I had the painting of this guy that was in the jail. So I put the dots on him and said, that should make you happy, And at the time, there were about 8 artists that came to help me make these things. These are just some of the objects that I would do. And I think someone mentioned Paul Smith. I remember Paul Smith going in the basement of a gallery and pulling out a piece and putting it in a show. And prior to that time, I was actually throwing the work out because no one wanted anything with glass that was glued together. No one, and it was wonderful. So I did quite a few of these kinds of works. And I started consolidating them into studio-generated works. And I think all of us, to some degree, there's a certain balance between technique and ideas, and how you move through in terms of how you learn what to do. It's like I learned to draw. This is a recent house. It's about 7 feet. Think about this. The other day, I started getting invitations from the Black History Museum they built down here. I was like, why did I get the invitation, And then, so I said, let's go to the opening. It's a big opening. And then I have a big house like that of mine. I said, oh, my God, I'm not even dead, It's really great, And so, it's, this is another installation that was done in Toledo, and there was a lot of different objects incorporated into the show, into the piece. They wanted us to reference things, and I kind of overdid it, and there were about 26 references, and then I was going to toss it, and they said, could you restructure it and put it in the entrance of the museum? So, I'm sort of a comedy of errors. I decided I wanted to paint more formally, and, I got married, and I made this garden, and I started painting the fruit. It was really difficult, the marriage, because in the garden, was the metaphor for the marriage, and I didn't put the labels on the food, so it was really hard to grow it, because you didn't know what was a weed and stuff, but it worked out. But these are some of the paintings. This is about, and the act, they're very, these are, so I'm a glass blower, and I love there's a language I believe in what we do. I learned, that involves the material in that language. It's almost an instinctive kind of almost an instinctive kind of intellect that carries over with craft materials. That's such an instinctive part of me forever, These ladders, and so these are substructures that I took almost an instinctive interest in, and as studio-generated objects, which take quite some time. There's blown, there's parts. I collect parts. I make shards. I go to schools and dig through their trash and mine things. And there's a chair. It's quite large, and there's maps and there's structures that are overlapped. I was in Africa, and I saw this tree with all these bottles, and I've always been interested in ritual, and I started making these mini kind of rituals out of aluminum and glass. I live in Omaha, and they wanted, I was in the studio so much, they wanted me to make this. Everyone has to make their little Omaha thing they asked me to make, so I said, could I float it? So I did. I could go fishing and stuff. Public art is something I get involved with. This is actually a piece in construction. It's in a subway system. The ladder is 16 feet, and it was covered with the dichroic glass. And everything went wrong that could go wrong, but the piece ended up pretty good, I must admit. It was called I Don't Want to Do This Anymore. It was called I Can't Stand It. And there were 12 engineers you know, and it's the first time, I never thought anything that I make should last very long, but they did. So I have to deal with it, you know. This is a sukkah, you know, which is a really Thanksgiving, you know, we kind of stole it from the Judaic religion. And every September it's a time that the Jewish it honors the time the Jewish people were in the desert and lived in these huts. So they asked me to make this 3-sided structure, and you know, everyone, just about everything in it has a very specific symbolic concept to Judaism, but you don't, unless you're Jewish, you don't really know it, you know. And it worked. It's at the Skirball Museum. So, you know, it was really well received. They own it. They put it out every 2 or 3 years. And they said, you know, you really understand Judaism, you should be Jewish, you know? And I said, you got enough problems, so me, you know? And this is a bus stop, you know, I remember the meetings, they were like, you're gonna like, people were gonna steal the benches, so I made them out of boulders, you know, they couldn't lift them. But you see the aluminum and the leaves, and there were 3 committees. I remember this. There were the art committee, and then there was the retirement home across the street. That was the core committee, and you know, and me. These are some drawings of a study. Most of the projects I address right then and there, but this one, it's a chandelier design. So there's one was nature. One is humanity, and one is spirituality, the themes. And the bird is 13 feet tall, so it's not small. This thing is really big, and you know, and you can sort of see the scale of it, huh? I do a lot of work with the State Department. I used to travel and do outreach programming, and I would do shows. This is a show in Germany. And it's at a factory that is maintained from the 1800s, and they asked me to grandfather a show, which means make it there. And it was really a tough show because in the bringing the glass, the company gave us a lot of glass, and then we brought the glass, and at the company, someone got injured, and they died. So we had to dedicate the show to the community. And it changed all the rules. So anyone could work on this show. The kids came. It was really amazing. And we actually changed the village. The kids designed things. I designed things. You know, we had all these discussions, and you know, I'm talking to these kids, but nobody speaks English. We didn't care, you know. And it was a wonderful thing. We developed educational programs. But this is one. This is in Mozambique. You know, on this day, we had to use paper plates because they ran out of paper. It was for 35 kids. Over 2 villages of kids showed up. Everything that could go wrong went wrong, but I died and went to heaven that day, you know. And people started making pigments out of clay and dyes. We had shows outside. I've been to about 8. That's just one. The picture's about 9 pictures long of kids. You know, there was pretty. You know, the war, they had decommissioned all the guns. You know, these are traditional carvers, and they want to make a glass house. I was like, what the heck, you know? This is in Omaha. It's the Talons. It's a Sudanese-based refugee basketball mentorship, and I work a lot with sort of displaced communities. He came to visit one day. He's head of he's head of a guerrilla organization, if you want to know the truth, and of a massive scale. And we deal with how to create. I'm an activist. I am actually a full-on activist, and I deal a lot with displaced people that have to redefine their homes. This is part of my studio, a section, and you can sort of see some of the construction processes. Here, that's that piece once it's finished. So it's really kind of hard. I'm sort of a nice guy, but I cuss a lot. I'm really grumpy. Because this work is, this thing, it's big, that's a 100-foot wall. So you can imagine what, moving it around and lifting it. This is at the Tampa Museum. And, this is in Denmark at the Konstvak Museum. I think, and each show there's, my daughter is half Danish, so the show was really dedicated to her. At the Corning Museum, we made a sort of an interior park, so in this space here. Let's see, this is at the Orlando Museum of Art, and the show was called Stories of the New World. It was about 7,000 feet. It was just, and there was a lot of mirror, a lot of projections, but everything was built in the show around things that happened, and since it was built around the Fountain of Youth and how the world had changed. Prior to that, Ponce de Leon and the Fountain of Youth and all that stuff, things were, pretty. The world was pretty flat, and they realized it's round. Whoops, excuse me. During that time, I met several collectors that were very involved with the Southern Christian leadership, and it's very interesting what I discovered. There's quite a few collectors in the glass field that were primary players in the civil rights movement. This is another project at the Nanny Helen Burroughs organization, and they had me work with these. I'm always working with communities wherever I go, and usually before I do a show, I'll build out an educational program a year or two before, and what overtones, like in this show here that's at the Museum of Nebraska Art, and they had no Indians at all in the collection that were alive anyway. So I got grumpy, and I made these movie theaters out of mirror and put racist cowboy movies in, and I did. And there's this is at sort of a workshop with Native American families that we do, where the men have to work with the kids. And that we did. I had a show, but I put their work up. The gallery was furious, We built this garden. It's a healing garden, and it's at a Montessori-based Native American school, and the kids learn their tradition. It's about partway. It's almost completely done, but this is some of the work. It's terrazzo, and there's the turtle. We made a turtle, but the kids play, and they instinctively learn by playing their cultural history. This is a show that we did at the Kaneko of the kids' work, glass blowing, and teepees. So I'm always kind of putzing around with how to, particularly being in Omaha and having that community and the challenges of that community. They're refugees in their own land, They wanted documentation, so I told the kids that we set up a photo booth, and they just dressed up and took pictures of themselves. This is in a mural I did in Pittsburgh, at the it was a big fight. I said, look, I don't want any physical, I don't want pictures of civil rights activists. I just want to engage this community with color, The best part was when I got stuck on that thing, and there was a big rainstorm, and I got washed. It was like being put in a washing machine. That was my favorite part of the whole project. It was a big chair. Kids. I worked with this kid here. He got cancer. He just had a chemotherapy treatment, and then I do a lot of work with pediatric cancer, and we formed a team of kids that took over the art projects and made this collaboratively. It was really a great thing, because 11 of the kids I got were diagnosed as being terminal, and 8 went into remission. We lost a couple later, but we just sort of dealt with, how that works, what inspires life, and it's an ongoing project. That's one of These are some of the team leaders. This is another project where they asked me to make a artwork that would inspire a community. So I thought, God, I'm not a prophet. What do you want me to do? So I found the worst school and the worst kids. I don't know what happened to the computer, but maybe I'm out of time anyway. So, you know, you can ask us questions, and thank you very much.